In the previous lecture, we went over the if-else statements. Now I'd like to go into if-else. Essentially, it's an addition for something you can use within if and else statement. So the one drawback of having if-else statements is that you can only have one condition, right? So for example, what we were looking at last time, if you're under the age of 18, then you're too young to drive. But what if you wanted to add another condition? For example, if you're under 18, you're too young to drive, and if you're over the age of 80, you're too old to drive. Something like that. How could you do that with just if and else? Well, the answer is that you can't, and you need to have something called else if. So if we were to use the example of the age thing, what you'd do is you'd say, I'll write it out so you can see the syntax, and we can go over that as well. Let's create a variable called age, and we'll set that to 12. It doesn't really matter. Basically, what we want to do is we want to say if, and then we put our condition in brackets. So if the age is less than 18, and then we put in curly brackets, I don't know, let's just say we have an ID, so we can say document dot get element by ID, and we'll just have this as, I don't know, age paragraph, then dot inner HTML, we can say too young. Okay, and then before, what we'd do at this point, we would just put an else here. But instead what we can do, well, let's put the else in. No, so the thing we can do after this is else if. So we're going to say if the age is less than 18, and now we want to say or if the age is over 80. And so if you think of it like that, so if you say it out loud, you say, if the age is under 18, do this, else, if this happens, and then we can use the else at the end. So we use else if, it writes else out for us very nicely, and then in this we want the other condition, which is age is over 80. And then we just literally do another line saying something like this. We can say too old. Too old. And then at the end of that, we can put in our else, then brackets. We can say, because the only other possibility, if they're not under 18 or they're not over 80, is that they're in between that age. So that's fine. Perfect. So that's one thing we could do. Now, what I was doing here, the reason why this is a background of green here, is I was just playing around with how we can use if, else, and else if to change the background of the screen. So what I recommend you do is pause the video here and have a think about any potential way that you could make it so that you have 3 different possibilities where under a certain circumstance the background is red, under a certain circumstance the background is blue, and then one in green. So those 3 colors. So pause the video now and have a think. I'm going to do pretty much the most basic way of doing it, where I don't even have to create a variable. So this is good. This is a good way, for example, if you want to test, if you want to create a load of code and add in some statements, but you want to make sure it's working first, you can add in something really basic like this. If 1 is equal to 3, which of course isn't true. So this is not going to be true. But I'm going to do document dot get which go to document.body .style .background color. So this is a bit of revision here for you from the CSS. Equals, and then we're going to do, let's say, yellow, no red. Okay. And then we want to do another possibility. So we have to have 3 possibilities. So we can't just do if else. So we're going to use else if. Else if 1 is equal to 1. So I'm going to have this one as the correct one. And I'll just copy and paste this. And this time I'll put this as yellow. And then at the end here, all I'll do is put an else. So if 1 is not equal to 3 and 1 is not equal to 1, then it will go to the else statement. Obviously here it will just stop at the 1 equals to 1, because that's true. So now if I refresh this, it should turn yellow. Fantastic. if I turn this to 4 or something, so now it's going to say, okay, if 1 is equal to 3, that's not true, so we'll ignore that. Else, if 1 is equal to 4, well, that's not true, we'll ignore that. So we'll just go straight to the else, which is green. So when I refresh this, it will turn green. Fantastic. So the thing to really keep in mind is to revise the syntax we went over last time. So how you write out these statements. First of all, you put the if, and then the condition goes in brackets, and then that what's actually supposed to happen, the actions to take, goes within the curly brackets. And then you just add one after the other. So if and else. Now, also in this lecture, we've been going over else if, which is basically saying, if this condition doesn't work, then check out this condition. And you could add as many as you wanted as well. It's not just a few. So we could add another else if just here by copy and pasting, probably be easier. So we could add loads in, literally as many as you want. You can add lots of different conditions. So for example, one thing you could have is if your website has a password where, for example, when the user creates an account, they have to give a password, and you want to make sure that not only is their password over 6 characters long, but also it contains numbers and let's see, I don't know, if they're changing their password, it's not the same as the other one. All those kind of things you could put in an if else if an else statement where you could say, if the number of characters is too short, then you could return, sort of change the inner HTML somewhere and say your password is too short. Else, if the password doesn't contain any numbers, then change the inner HTML to say you need to have numbers in your password. Else, if this new password is equal to the old password, then change the inner HTML to say you can't use your old password. So that's and that's how it's used literally when people are coding their websites, their apps, anything where someone has to create a password. They're all using if, else if, and else statements, like the industry standard. So even the best coders will be using these sorts of things. So they're really, really useful. If, else if, and else. And right now, the biggest challenge for you is to, first of all, get your head around how else if works. So basically you're able to add on more conditions, but also just remembering the syntax. Once you get used to it, it's completely easy, but you really want to get used to writing this out because before you do that and you don't feel comfortable with it, you're less likely to just do this all the time. So what I recommend you do at the end of this lecture is have a go at just writing out a few of these yourself and think of a few applications. Like, for example, try the password thing. That could be fun. And think about how you could have some applications that would use if and else statements. So you can kind of get a feel now that we're getting into these sort of if-else statements, and we'll be going through some things in lectures to come. We're starting to realize, oh, this is actually how real coders, real programmers, what they do on a day-to-day basis. They actually use this stuff. So you're really getting close to industry standard sort of the coding. So congratulations on making it to this point, and I'll see you in the next lecture.